maps and all that.
This is a live mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, quarter of the
This is a live mic check for YouTube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's kind of what it is.
This is a live mic check for YouTube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a live mic check for Town Hall streams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You're on the air.
Okay, welcome to the June 20th meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. Attendance, we have everybody in attendance, including our 2 new members. So, for your first time, you will not be voting, because we got the other 5. So,
Welcome. Thanks for joining.
thank you for being here and for volunteering. Okay, first item is approval of the minutes. And everybody look through them.
I have a couple of corrections. At least for mine. On page 2, going down about almost to the middle of the page, it says that Ms. Perlmutter also suggested the applicant consider installing some screening such as hedges or evergreens to prevent headlights from going into houses. Okay, that needs to be clarified. I was talking about the hammerhead turn. If we could just add on the hammerhead turn to that. And on the next page, a little more than halfway down, it says, Ms. Perlmutter noted it states in the subdivision regulations that approval of a preliminary site plan does guarantee final approval. No, I said it does not. You wish.
Minor problem.
Good catch. Tom, I have one suggested clarification as well. On the first page, first of all, let me say I thought these were incredibly well-crafted minutes.
Yes.
They were thorough, they were well-organized, just really lovely. It says the maintenance of Henchy Way would be the responsibility of the homeowners association, and I'd like to suggest that we say the Binnacle Hill Owners Association. There is no Henchy Way Association, and I didn't want it to be at some time in the future misconstrued. Is that okay? No?
Yeah.
She's got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as modified, I have a motion here.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as modified.
A second.
All in favor? Okay. So, our agenda for tonight, we have several findings of facts. For starters, first item is item 180-401, Catherine S. Eraclis, Walsh Engineering, and site plan review for a riprap, revetment, et cetera, on Skipper Joe's Point. So, Nina.
Okay, I was responsible for the findings of fact, and I'll just read what I have, and if you need to make a modification, fine. This is the Catherine S. Eraclis, Walsh Engineering Associates, authorized agent, application number 180401, dated April 18th, 2018, for site plan approval for riprap revetment and driveway construction at 30 Skipper Joe's Point, Kennebunkport, Maine. Following a site plan review pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance and a public hearing held on June 6, 2018, the Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings and conclusions and renders the following decision. Findings of fact are as follows. 1, the owner of the property is Catherine S. Eraclis, who has an address at 130 Mount Auburn Street, apartment 207, Cambridge, Massachusetts, 02138. 2, the property has a street address of 30 Skipper Joe's Point Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046, identified as Assessor's Tax Map 30, Block 6, Lot 7 on the Municipal Assessor's Tax Maps. 3, the property is non-conforming, approximately 0.93 acres, with a single-family home, garage, existing driveway, and landscaping, and is located in the Goose Rocks and Shoreland and Resource Protection Zones. 4, the owner, Catherine S. Eraclis, who is represented by the applicant, Walsh Engineering Associates, with an office at 1 Karen Drive, Suite 2A, Westbrook, Maine, 04092. Hereinafter, the applicant has demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a copy of a warranty deed recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, Book 6962, pages 311 through 312, and dated February 28, 1994. 5, in the application, the applicant proposes site improvements that consist of A, constructing a 200-foot riprap revetment seawall with granite steps along the lot's shoreline at a slope of 1.5 to 1 and a height of 16 feet with 5-foot diameter granite boulders and steps, all within the 25-foot setback of the intertidal zone. B, reestablishing the present Rosa Rugosa hedgerow behind the seawall. C, removing a portion of the driveway below the preliminary flood elevation of 12-foot, rebuilding and repaving it up to an elevation of 14 feet. D, remove portions of a stone retaining wall and replace with a new stone retaining wall behind the 75-foot setback. E, removing the existing and proposed walkways to the proposed seawall and adding an equivalent paved area to the driveway. And F, discontinue use of garage, replacing doors with a concrete masonry unit wall of elevation 14.5 feet and exterior wall above. 6, the applicant has withdrawn the proposed modifications to the garage and the construction of the concrete masonry unit wall and exterior wall above, so that they are no longer a part of this application. 7, no increase in impervious surface area will occur in this construction. 8, the applicant applied in 2015 to the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, MDEP, and was granted approval for the riprap shoreline stabilization. 9, the applicant has requested no submission waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. 10, the applicant has requested no performance standard waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. 11, pursuant to the requirements of Article 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance, Guidelines for Decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings which would otherwise compel denial. And they are listed here, A through somewhere down here. A through, on we go, A through P, and they were all, none of them were negative. So it's approval there. When a proposed development will be located within the shoreland and resource protection zones, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, Article 10, the townwide regulations in Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require that the board makes positive findings based on the information presented that the proposed use will maintain safe and healthful conditions, yes, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters, finding is yes, will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater, yes, will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat, yes, will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland and coastal waters, yes, will protect archaeological and historical resources as designated in the comprehensive plan, yes, will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use, yes, is in conformance with the performance standards set forth in Section 5.6 of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, yes. Any negative finding by the board means the application has been denied. The application is otherwise complete. There were no negative findings. So conclusions are, Articles 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial. And as noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision, the site plan application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any, pursuant to Article 1011 and 1012E. The applicant pursuant to 1012E shall notify the Planning Board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. No assignment or transfer of rights to construct an approved project is valid without prior review and approval by the planning board of a new performance guarantee to ensure that any assignee or transferee has the financial capacity to undertake or complete the project. 2, the applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the form of a copy thereof attested by the Register of Deeds before any permit may issue or before any construction activity may commence. The applicant will comply with all terms and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances as well as the MDEP approvals. Dated June 20th, 2018. Still want to correct it?
That's all good.
Okay.
So I move we accept that as complete and get it approved.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay, so let's get it signed off.
This one. I'll move it that way first.
Borrow that for a sec.
I was going to say, if the alternates don't feel comfortable signing, there is a signature line for you. You don't have to. We have the approval of the board.
So, there you are, there's your pen back. You guys want to sign or not? Okay. Okay, so after Neil signs, he can start the next one. The next one is Robert and Dana Holland, Riverside and Pickering Marine Contractors. A finding of facts for approval to construct a ramp, pier, gangway, and seasonal float on Wilds District Road. So Neil, when you're finished signing, if you could start reading that finding of facts.
All right. Application of Dana and Robert Holland, 155 Wilds District Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046, to install a 4-foot by 15-foot access ramp leading to a 4-foot by 35-foot pier, leading to a 4-foot by 30-foot seasonal ramp, which leads to a 10-foot by 20-foot seasonal float for tidal access to Patty Creek. Following a site plan review pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on May 16, 2018, and a final public hearing held on June 6, 2018, the Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of fact and conclusions and renders the following decision subject to the conditions enumerated below. Findings of fact are as follows. The applicant is Dana Holland and Robert Holland with a mailing address of 104 Hull Street, Newton, Mass. 02460. In a letter dated August 9, 2017, the applicant has authorized Riverside Marine Construction Incorporated, DBA Riverside and Pickering Marine Contractors, to act as the agent for this matter. The property has a street address of 155 Wilds District Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The property is located in Cape Porpoise West, the resource protection and shoreland zones. The owner has demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a warranty deed dated September 30th, 2016, and recorded October 3rd, 2016, in the York County Registry of Deeds at Book 17334, pages 335 to 338. Number 5, the property is legally conforming and consists of 0.89 acres, more or less, in a single-family residence. Number 6, the property is located at 155 Wilds District Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, and is identified as map 22, block 5, lot 22, on the municipal tax assessor's maps. Number 7, in an application dated April 12, 2018, the applicant proposes to construct from the property into Patty Creek a 4-foot wide by 15-foot long access ramp, a 4-foot wide by 35-foot long pier, a 4-foot wide by 30-foot long seasonal ramp, and a 10-foot wide by 20-foot long 200, equating 200 square feet seasonal float. Seasonal ramp and seasonal pier are to be removed and stored elsewhere and not on the property or in an upland location on the subject property during seasons of non-use. The proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp, and seasonal dock will extend approximately 88 feet or 19.82% into Patty Creek, which measures approximately 444 feet across from the same point. See supplemental document 6B, 6C, and 6E provided to the planning board on June 1, 2018. This meets Land Use Ordinance 5.11.B.15 requirements. The property, number 8, the property and proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp, and seasonal float are located outside of the velocity zones as shown on the most recent flood insurance rate map produced by FEMA. This meets LUO 5.11.B.1 requirements. Number 9, the proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp, and seasonal float are not located within the habitat of a threatened or endangered species as mapped by either the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. This meets LUO 5.11.B.2 requirements. The proposed seasonal float measures 10 feet wide by 20 feet long. This meets the LUO 5.11.B.3 requirements. Number 11, the applicant and property have approximately 427 feet of shore frontage. This meets LUO 5.11.B.4 requirements. Number 12, the proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp will be located 404 feet 6 inches from the southerly abutter and 33 feet from the northerly abutter. The seasonal float will be located 476 feet 6 inches from the southerly abutter and 26 feet from the northerly abutter. See supplemental email from Riverside dated June 20, 2018. This meets LUO 5.11.B.5 requirements. Number 13, 6 of the proposed support pilings for the proposed pier will be located in the coastal wetland, and 2 of the proposed support pilings of the proposed pier will be located in the upland and will not result in measurable soil disturbance. The proposed access ramp will be a minimum of 1 foot above the ground as measured from the beginning of the ramp. The proposed deck boards will be no greater than 5.5 inches in width and will be spaced 3/4 of an inch apart. The applicant does not propose stairs. This meets LUO 5.11.B.6 requirements, and any reference with respect to deck boards being spaced 1/2 inches apart is interpreted as a minimum spacing requirement and not an exact spacing requirement. Number 14, the proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp, and seasonal float are not located within an existing developed or natural beach area. This meets LUO 5.11.B.7 requirements. Number 15, the proposed seasonal access ramp and seasonal float will be in place on a seasonal basis and stored outside of the coastal wetland, in the upland, or off-site during the off-season. This meets LUO 5.11.B.8 and .16 requirements. Number 16, the surrounding area is developed with both residential and commercial structures, including docks associated with those structures. The proposed access ramp, pier, and seasonal ramp will be 4 feet or less in width, and the support pilings for the proposed pier will be located approximately 16 feet apart. This meets LUO 5.11.B.9 requirements. No lighting is proposed for this project, so this meets LUO 5.11.B.10. It's not applicable. We're getting there. Number 18, no structure is proposed to be built on, over, or abutting the proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal access ramp, or seasonal float. So LUO 5.11.B.11, .13, and .14 are not applicable. Number 19, the proposed project is located in Patty Creek, a tidal water. LUO 5.11.B.12 is not applicable. Number 20, the proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp, and seasonal float will be used for recreational purposes. This meets LUO 5.11.B.17 requirements. Number 21, the proposed access ramp, pier, seasonal ramp, and seasonal float is not an enlargement, alteration, repair, or the rebuilding of a non-conforming pier, dock, walkway, wharf, ramp, or float. LUO 5.11.B.18 is not applicable. Number 22, the applicants have received approvals from the Maine DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. Number 23, the applicants have requested no submission or performance waivers from the requirements of the the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. Number 24, pursuant to the requirements of Article 10.10.a of the Land Use Ordinance, the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings which would otherwise compel denial. And I go through A through P, and there are no negative findings. Number 25, when a proposed development will be located within the shoreland or resource protection zones, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunk Land Use Ordinance, Article 10, the townwide regulations in Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require that the board makes positive findings based on the information presented, that the proposed use A will maintain safe and healthful conditions, finding is yes. B will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters, finding is yes. C will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater, the finding is not applicable. D will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat, the finding is yes. E will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland and coastal waters, finding is yes. F will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan, the finding is not applicable. G will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use, finding is yes. And H is in conformance with the performance standards set forth in Section 5.6 of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, the finding is yes. Any negative finding by the board means that the application has been denied. 26, the application is otherwise complete. Conclusions, Article 10.10A of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial, and as noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision, the site plan application I've identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any, pursuant to Article 10.11. 1, the applicant pursuant to 10.11 shall notify the planning board prior to the transfer of rights to construct the approved project. 2, the applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the form of a copy thereof attested by the Register of Deeds before any permits may issue or before any construction activity may commence. And 3, the applicant will comply with all terms and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances, as well as the Maine DEP and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approval. Dated June 20, 2018. Any revisions? Good.
Motion?
I make a motion to approve the findings of fact.
I second it.
Favor?
All in favor?
Okay. Let's get that most of the way signed off and then it can start. The third item is item 180403, Southern York Properties LLC, Ralph Austin Esquire, authorized agent. It is for approval to remove an existing single-family dwelling and build a new one at the same location on Mill Lane. And Ed Francis is the case manager, so Ed, why don't you proceed and we'll finish signing.
Kennebunkport Planning Board, finding of facts and decision for the application of Southern York Properties LLC, 4 Mill Lane, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. Following site plan reviews pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on 16 May and 6 June 2018, and a public hearing held on 6 June 2018, the Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of fact and conclusions and renders the following decision, subject to the conditions enumerated below. Finding of facts are as follows. The applicant is Southern York Properties, LLC, the applicant, with a mailing address of 450 Knights Run Avenue, Unit 1506, Tampa, Florida, 33602, 5995. The property has a street address of 4 Mill Lane, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The property is identified as Map 9, Block 1, Lot 15 on the municipal tax assessor's maps. 4, the property is located in the village residential zone, entirely in the shoreland zone, the 250-foot buffer, and partially in the resource protection zone, title in Riverine FEMA 100-year floodplain. 5, the applicant authorized the firm of Woodward, Edmonds, Danilick, Austin, Smith, and Jacques, PA of Biddeford, Maine, and the company of Gary E. Martin Incorporated of Kennebunkport, Maine, to prepare the application and act as their agent for this matter in a letter dated 11 December 2017. The applicant was represented by Ralph W. Austin, Esquire, on 16 May, and Sandra L. Guay, Esquire, 6 June, at the proceedings, with support from Mr. Gary Martin, contractor. The applicant has demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a deed of sale by personal representatives recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, Book 15660, pages 246 to 248, on the 19th of June, 2009. The property comprises .061 acres to the high water mark and contains a single-family residence with 1,326 square feet of living space, per survey and on-site measurement data provided by the applicant. The lot and structure are legally non-conforming. Based on survey data provided by the applicant, the lot is 2,639 square feet, which is below the 4,000 square foot minimum. The lot width is 50 foot, which is below the 100-foot minimum. The structure is entirely within the 75-foot setback from the Kennebunk River high water mark. Minimum setbacks for the front, side, and rear are not met. Lot coverage is 46.91%. Item 9, in an application dated 25 April 2018, the applicant proposes to remove the existing house and build a new house with the exact same living space in the exact same location. The applicant reasoned and the board agreed that this met section 8.3.b.5 of the land use ordinance, which requires that the replacement structure comply with the setbacks to the greatest practical extent. Since setbacks on all 4 sides are currently non-conforming, any movement to reduce one setback would increase another. Item 10, in addition to the original site plan application package, the applicant provided these supplemental documents. A revised site plan and proposed new construction, item 8 in the original application, was provided at the 6 June Planning Board meeting, correcting and clarifying that the first floor elevations of the proposed and existing structures are identical. And item B, a copy of the applicant's main DEP permit by rule notification form to remove the existing dwelling structure, build new dwelling structure in the same location approved by DEP on the 23rd of May 2018. 11, the applicant provided 2 letters from Patrick Jordan, P.E. of Shelley Engineering, describing his assessments of the existing structure's foundation and framing. His inspection found both foundation and framing to be in very poor condition, and he recommended that a new foundation be installed, and that the existing structure be demolished and a new structure be built that will meet the current building code requirements. The applicants have requested no submission or performance waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. Pursuant to the requirements of Article 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance, Guidelines for Decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings, which would otherwise compel denial. And then I've listed A through P, and all of them, the findings are either yes or not applicable. There are no negative findings. Rationale is provided where it's appropriate. Item 14, when a proposed development will be located within the shoreland or the resource protection zones, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, Article 10, the townwide regulations in Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require that the board make positive findings based on the information presented that the proposed use, and then items A through H, are listed as described, and all of the findings are yes as well. In conclusion, Articles 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial, as noted above. The Board makes no such findings. Decision, the site plan application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any, pursuant to Article 1011 and 1012E. 1, the applicant pursuant to 1012E shall notify the Planning Board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. 2, the applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the York County Registry of Deeds before any permits may issue or before any construction activity may commence. 3, the applicant shall comply with all terms and approval and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances, as well as Maine DEP approvals, dated 20 June 2018.
Okay, can I get a motion here?
I'd like to make a proposal to approve.
I think, well, somebody,
I'll second.
okay. All in favor? Okay, it's approved. So let's get it signed off and then we can discuss the next item. Okay, the last item on the agenda is item 180201, Binnacle Hill Phase 2, Teradyne Consultants Authorized Agent. This is discussion of the preliminary subdivision plan, and we will be reopening the continued public hearing again in a bit, but I think first off, Mr. Tadema, whatever, we'll be, I'm sorry, we'll be presenting initially.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the board, for having us back tonight. Welcome some of the new members. We are back to continue the public hearing on Binnacle Hill Phase 2. Last time we were here, thank you. Last time we were here, we heard some feedback, but we also heard concerns from the board and from members of the public that you all didn't have enough time to review the materials that were submitted. So we're back to discuss essentially the plans that and materials that were submitted about a month ago at this point. A couple things I do want to touch on before we get back into sort of questions and hearing from the public again. In an email to Werner, and it was intended to be forwarded, in an email from Ralph Austin, the applicant's attorney, to Werner, and it was intended to be forwarded to the board. Ralph made several points to sort of clarify some of the items that were discussed 2 weeks ago, and I'll just quickly touch on those to put them onto the record. There was a question about plowing. How will plowing be handled for Henchy Way, particularly up at the proposed gate that is up at the top of the hill there? And the answer is the applicant, the developer and later the homeowners association will plow this road, and most of the snow will be stored up at the gate during the storm, and then once the storm is over, that gate will be opened. It'll be cleared out, and there is an area set aside for snow storage up in that area as well. So the snow will be plowed into the snow storage area. There was Nina brought up a point about screening some of the abutting houses from headlights from vehicles on Timber Way. So vehicles coming down Timber Way, some of these houses might get some headlights in the windows, and we think it's a good point, and we will certainly explore solutions to that and come back with a proposal during the review for final approval. And finally, a lot of discussion about Henchy Way and how it's going to be used and who's going to think they have rights to it. When we went from a full access road to the emergency access design here, clearly the intent is to keep the general public and through traffic off Henchy. So to that end, we're proposing a sign be placed down at the end of Henchy, indicating that it is a private way and that it's a dead end, so there's no through traffic on that road. The other thing I just want to touch on quickly is the memo from Acorn Engineering dated June 18th. So when we were, again, 2 weeks ago, we were here. There were still some questions about the peer review. So the board requested that it be sent back to the peer review engineer at Acorn, and he review the revised preliminary plans. He's done that, and he issued this memo on the 18th, and I'll quote one of the lines in the first paragraph where he says the majority of Acorn's prior comments were addressed. And then he's offered a few additional comments, and really the comments, if you read through them, they are recommendations for notes on the plan, and in one or two cases additional information, for instance, adding the location of driveway curb cuts. And certainly we agree with that, and that'll be on the final plan set. So we have we take no issues with any of the comments, and we intend to comply with the comments from the peer review engineer. So with that, again, we're happy to answer questions. Hopefully you've had time to more thoroughly review the plans, and again, we're hoping to leave here with preliminary approval tonight and quickly turn around a plan set for final approval. Thanks very much.
Okay, are there questions from the board?
I have a quick question on one of the waivers you're seeking. I tried to find the side slope section in the subdivision regs, and I just couldn't. I don't know if I was.
It's 2 instead of 3.
It's 2 instead of 3.
Should be 2.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure if we go down that road.
12-2B2F.
Yeah.
I can give you the corrected reference. The letter I put together dated May 30th did have an incorrect reference to the section. The section should be 12.2.B.3.B.4. So hopefully you can understand how I missed a couple of
I
those.
can't imagine.
Can't understand it, no.
But essentially, it calls for side slopes on road embankments to be a 3-to-1 slope, which is typical. That's a slope that's can be stabilized with grass fairly easily and maintained. But in wetland crossing areas, in order to reduce the fill placed in wetland areas, we request that be steepened up to a 2-to-1 slope. Again, that's a really kind of standard practice in the state, so we're asking for that waiver.
I just wanted, I'm still not clear on a couple of points on lighting. As I understand it, there's an easement on Henchy Way about lighting and a deed somewhere. I don't know what that reads, so I don't know what the restriction really is. I'm glad to see you're going to put some barrier of some sort so that the houses don't get those halogen bulbs right in through their windows. But I'm concerned because Henchy Way is a little bit long, and even though there was basically testimony from the public about how they normally go up and down Henchy Way in the dark. I'm concerned about people who don't know it being on a slope like that. And I didn't see any real good lighting right around there. Suppose somebody's coming down in the dark or going up in the dark, so it's very easy to trip even on pavement. I'm wondering if there could be some solution to that, low lighting along the walkway or something like that, so that people can see. I haven't been out to the site again to see how long it is, what the problems might be out there. I think the pavement will help a lot, but I think you ought to look at the lighting there as well.
Understood, yeah.
Okay. On your first waiver, you talk about going to a 2-to-1 instead of a 3-to-1 slope. And I'm unclear about that, not being an engineer. Two, whether you're going to do it all the way down, or it looked like you were just going to do wetland areas, and what was the rationale for that, and the permanence of it, how it's maintained. Could you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So when we talk about slopes, a ratio of 3-to-1 or 2-to-1, we're talking about horizontal run to vertical rise. So a 3-to-1 slope, you're going 3 feet horizontally for every 1 foot vertical, right? So 3 feet in the horizontal, 1 vertical. On a 2-to-1 slope, you're only going 2 feet horizontally while you're dropping 1 foot vertically.
So it's steeper.
So it's steeper. A 2-to-1
Okay.
is a steeper slope, and the rationale there is the road is built slightly above existing grade, and you're going through a wetland, so the steeper those slopes, the less they encroach out into the wetland area.
Okay.
And you're right, the majority of the road we are proposing 3-to-1 slopes. It's only in those areas where there's proposed wetland impacts where we're proposing to steepen that to 2-to-1. And usually where, like I mentioned earlier, the 3-to-1 slope is kind of a typical slope that's very easily stabilized with vegetation and maintained. A 2-to-1 slope usually takes a little more care in preparing it, and usually there's some sort of erosion control blanket placed while the grass is planted. It's still a slope that can be easily stabilized with vegetation, but sometimes it takes a little more to get the vegetation to catch. So on our plans, we are calling for an erosion control blanket along those areas.
Okay.
So you'd have more erosion with a 2-to-1,
You have,
because it's steeper.
like I said, so if you have a healthy catch of grass, you shouldn't see any erosion. The trick is getting the grass to catch. So you plant grass, and if you do get a storm before the grass has a chance to germinate and start to really set roots, you can get runoff. And a 2-to-1 slope that's unstabilized, one that just has loam on it, for instance, does have more potential for erosion because it's steeper. So that's why during the construction process, we do call for some measures, increased measures to get that grass to grow.
The other question that I had was the significant trees on the property. It was sort of left in question, and I assume you're going to deal with it in the final plan. I'm not exactly sure where every single one of them is. I've looked for them on the plan, but there was a dispute about whether, for example, a Norway spruce was a significant tree or not, and I'd like to know, there was a question of would there be erosion or flooding? If you took that out, do you need to take it out? How do you plan to handle that?
Yeah, so is this the one on lot 21? I believe it is.
Yeah.
So that's in this area here, and the significant trees are, and significant trees, the ordinance requires that we identify trees on the site greater than 21 inches in diameter at breast height. We had a tree survey done. Our consultant identified trees that met that criteria, and they're shown on the subdivision plan now, sheet C 2.0. The one on lot 21, in our consultant's opinion, did not meet that criteria. The Millers, who live here, asked permission of the developer to have their own tree expert, or I'm not sure what his title is, but someone to go out there and either confirm or look at some other trees. So they did that, and he came back and said he thought, in his opinion, this one, the Norway spruce, did meet that criteria. And he had a caveat in his memo that said, well, I measured it at this knot in the tree, which fell right around breast height, and I could understand how someone else measuring this tree might not feel that it met that criteria. Regardless, it's close, right? I mean, it's very close to a significant tree. It's in an area of lot 21 that would require that would very likely require it to be taken down to make lot 1 buildable. That said, we think that, throughout this site, we've done what we can to preserve trees, preserve habitat mostly, and more than half the site is going to be left forested and in a conservation easement.
Well, I raise this point because whether it's significant or not, there are a lot of trees up there. You have an awful lot of surrounding wetlands in these lots, and trees are awfully good at water absorption. So taking out trees means that you have much more potential for flooding, not only on the lots, but also in surrounding areas. So I'd like to see, a little more on the maintenance of trees, whether they're significant or not, and especially around the wetlands area on the final plan. It wouldn't hurt.
Sure. So to clarify, I'm with you on that. I just want to get a little clarity to make sure we give you what we're looking for. The wetland areas that are proposed to be disturbed are clearly delineated on the plan and go through a permitting process with the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. So any disturbance within wetlands beyond what's shown on the plan would not be allowed. Similarly, the area that's outside the lot boundaries, particularly on the upstream side, uphill side of Timberway, which is where the majority of those wetlands are, is going to be put into protection with a deed restriction that will prohibit clearing. And so we've done everything we can, I feel, to maintain existing drainage patterns out here, particularly with the existing wetlands and the wetland channels. You'll see some wetland fingers through here that we've preserved, and we've preserved that for drainage, but we've also preserved that for the species that use the wetlands and the surrounding uplands as habitat. And that's something that the DEP and even more so the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife pays very close attention to. So as far as maintenance of trees, maintenance of significant trees and so on and so forth, I'm not sure what else exactly is on your mind.
I understand the restricted areas and that you're maintaining the trees in there. I'm just concerned because I see an awful lot of houses surrounding that area, on your map you know, to the east and to the south and so forth. And I think care ought to be taken on the lots, even if they aren't significant trees. Before you take down trees, I think you ought to take some care to look at those trees and what they might be doing, not only for the lots, but for the surrounding neighboring areas.
Sure, okay. I understand, yeah. And I think if you, maybe Jeff or Ralph can speak to this a little bit, but there is there's a process outlined in the homeowners association documents where owners of these lots have to provide a clearing plan to the developer so he can review the limits of clearing within the lot. And if you've been out to phase one, you can see how it's gone so far. There is quite a bit of vegetation left between the lots in an effort to maintain some privacy between the lots. You know, it's not, no one's gone out there and clear cut across those lot lines. So
No, I wouldn't expect them to. I wouldn't expect the developer to. It's just that homeowners coming in sometimes are very naive
Yeah.
about the environment and what trees do for people and what vegetation does for people.
Sure.
So, in
Understood.
ways that are not apparent.
Yeah.
But they would still ultimately have, if somebody decides to cut down a tree after the fact, they would still have to go through the homeowners association to do that?
Maybe Ralph's more familiar with those documents. I'll let him touch on this.
For the record, Ralph Austin, yeah, in the covenants that we prepared, while Jeff is still developing the project, the homeowner would have to get his approval for no trees larger than 5 inches in diameter, measured at a height of 4 feet from the ground, shall be cut, trimmed, or altered. Well, this one is if located within 15 feet of Binnacle Hill Lane, Timberway, or any lot line. And beyond that, when they present the building plans, they need to have a clearing plan. Once Jeff is done, then he transfers those approval rights to the homeowners association. So there'd be a board of the association that would have to make the determination. So a homeowner legally isn't allowed to just go out and start cutting trees.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you go through procedurally and operationally the gate and accessibility and who has it? I
Sure.
mean, I read about the snowplow and,
Yes. So the gate will be located on private property at the end of what is Henshue Way. And so there will be, no vehicle traffic will get through. There is an allowance for folks on the sidewalk to get through, so bicyclists, pedestrians. It'll be locked, and there will be keys that the fire department and emergency services will have. There's a product called Knox Box or Knox Lock. They're a company that provides these sort of locks to municipalities or to groups that have a master key so that they all match
Fire
in town
department.
or whatever. Exactly.
Right.
So the fire department.
We have
So the
one
fire
on
department
ours.
will have one, and the homeowners association will have one as well. So plowing, it'll make plowing operations much easier. It'll make just general maintenance much easier. But the gate will remain closed unless plowing operations are underway, and certainly no vehicle
Right.
traffic is going to be allowed to go through there.
right, so I just wanted to confirm, so that sign that's placed at the beginning stating that it's a private dead-end road is absolutely true then?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a quick follow-up question on that. So access isn't going to be permanently restricted, right? I mean, obviously, people will be able to get through, and I know you've said that, but I just want to clarify that permanent access is not going to be restricted?
Pedestrians or
I mean, you're putting a gate up, so the
Yes.
land use ordinance says gates or other form of permanent access restriction across access roads, streets, or pedestrian ways are not permitted. So it's not gonna be permanent restriction. Obviously, there's gonna be plow trucks coming through there for emergency access,
correct.
things like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
I'm just
Also-
wondering,
Also, for that paragraph really is more what we did on Ebbs Cove, where we made sure they didn't have a gate on the only access to the place. This is more a gated community,
okay.
I think.
I think I'm just more wondering if we go down that road, is a waiver necessary for that or not, I guess.
I was gonna discuss that later,
But
Yeah, and I guess I would defer to maybe Werner or maybe Ralph can weigh in on that.
Well, I question whether it's a regular access road.
Yeah.
And in the sense of the way the land use ordinance describes it, this is meant to be more of an emergency access.
Right.
right.
Yeah, but
This
you-
is not a road, street, or the pedestrian way doesn't have a gate, if that's, as I saw the picture anyway. So it's only the, I guess it's an access road. so
I guess
you're at-
it's really, how do you define road or street? And-
Right.
Well, I think beyond that, it's how do you interpret the purpose of this section of the land use ordinance? What I read it to be is, you couldn't have a gated community, like I lived in Florida.
Right.
We don't have those in Kennebunkport. It doesn't prohibit an emergency access road. My belief.
I was going to say, when we read that, I agree with Tom and Ed's interpretation that the intent was to prevent gated communities, so the primary access cannot be gated, and it's not. In this case, it's an emergency access. The gate prevents it from becoming a through street, which is what the residents in the area did not want it to be a through street. And again, it's not a permanent access restriction, as Neil pointed out, because one, pedestrians have free access through there, and plow trucks and emergency vehicles would have access as well.
Ralph, I have another question for you.
Sure.
Hypothetically speaking, I know that's always a dangerous question. Say, the waiver for the dead-end street isn't granted or something. What would stop the developer from paving Henchy Way anyway and putting in a pedestrian way? I know there's just for
I mean, it's part of the
aesthetics
subdivision.
purposes and, well, say you stopped, right? You didn't go the full 1,400
Oh,
feet.
okay.
And then you put in, say, a pedestrian walkway out and then down. And then he paved it, just like you guys are planning to do. What would stop him from doing that? Because there's obviously concerns about plowing and all that stuff, and if he can do it anyway,
I mean, I mean, that's a tough question. And Warner might be better able to answer that. I mean, we have a plan in front of you that includes Henchy Way. So if it's ultimately approved, whatever shape that final approval is, that's our limitation.
And you'd have to comply.
We'd have to comply with that. But so, one, obviously, we're hoping
Right.
you grant the waiver on the length of the dead-end street, and I have some comments on that if it becomes an issue. But if you were to limit it, there would be, I presume we'd still have as part of that plan, use of Henchy Way for some, at least for pedestrian access.
Well, if you only had one house up Henchy Way and you own Henchy Way, there's nothing to stop you from paving that.
Correct. If that weren't, if we were to split off that end from the subdivision and say it's no longer part of the subdivision, a single-family house could go there and would use Henchy Way as its primary access. I don't know if that,
yeah, that helps. Well, at least for my purposes.
Yeah, well, and I'd encourage the board to think that, when it comes to dealing with findings, that you develop a specific findings related to your interpretation of that section, regardless of whether there's a waiver or not. you know, because I think that's an important piece, just to point that out, that, you know, that the board is interpreting the subdivision regs to mean this. I mean, I can also tell you that there's supportive language in the comprehensive plan that really mirrors your opinion, you know, in terms of speaking against gated communities. And again, I believe the intent really is to deal with the primary access. Again, it doesn't say that necessarily in the language, you know, and I think it can be interpreted, you know, a couple different ways, but I just would encourage the board, make sure that you do specific findings on that interpretation.
Right. Okay, any other comments from the board before I?
I have a comment and I have a question.
Okay, go.
My first comment is to thank the applicant, this first speaker in particular, for his patience. I understand it feels like it's been a month since you did the last submission, but I assure you it was received by the office on the 30th, which is only 20 days ago. And I'll assure you that the board members did not get it instantaneously after that. I had great sympathy and still believe that the board was correct in allowing the public ample time to look at what was a significant update and one that came about after, I believe, a month and a half of work on your part in order to incorporate the changes. The work itself shows that you gave it that much time, and again, thank you for your patience. I think that the quality of the work merits the additional reflection by the reviewers. I have one question now. Thanks for addressing the snow plow question that I think it was me that raised last time. I have one related issue. One of the, I think it was the Millers, raised the concern that the plows, they didn't really want them backing into their driveways and turning around, and I'm not sure your response made it clear to me how that concern was addressed. How will the plow that's leaving the snow up at the gate now, is it going to go up the street and back down, or is it, is there thinking on that?
Yeah, the guy who
'Cause I know
is
who's
gonna be
I know
driving the
who's
plow
driving the plow.
truck
Yeah, I know.
is right here, so he can probably, he could probably answer it better
you.
than I could. I've never driven a plow truck.
Jeff Valley, the applicant, Pinnacle Hill. So, it's relatively straightforward, but I'm happy to explain how I would tackle it. There is not really a world where you can, people will tell you it's never good to plow uphill. It makes it that much more challenging. But it's not a situation where you can start at the top of the hill and plow downhill, obviously. Yeah. So the process is just to take it in small chunks at a time. Start here, take a section, work your way up, back down the road, work your way up again, back down the road, work your way up again. And as Mike touched on, collect the snow in that area. That's how I'd approach it.
So in your opinion, it will not require you turning around in driveways?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, thank you.
But the gate has to remain clear, right, for emergency access? So the snow's going to be on the side, going to be piled on the side?
Pushed up to the gate, I would think, yep. Pushed over to the side, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as Mike had commented on, which is not unusual for the circumstances of something like this, as soon as the storm is over, you come in with again, either a plow, depending on the size of the storm, or in the case of a big storm or a series of storms, you would come in with a small bobcat or and move the snow out of the way, and again, dispose of it and set it in this area here where we've called out for snow.
Will the gate swing in either direction?
I'm
just thinking of the...
No. Makes sense for that hinge to be both ways, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, it's going to make it easier on whoever has to shovel their way in there to get to the gate and open it up and free it up, so.
Okay, so anything more from the board? Or? Guess we can open up the public hearing then. Any abutters would? Looks like they're deciding if they're going to speak, which one gets to speak. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Scott Edmonds. I am the attorney for the Fetzners, who are the landowners along Henchy Way, the first house along Henchy Way there. We have been in communication with the applicant during this process, and we appreciate their responsiveness and willingness to speak to us. We discussed a couple of issues, and one of them was to make sure that a note on the final plan that there was a note that indicated that Henchy Way on the final plan would be limited to, for vehicular access, the two houses that are currently access Henchy Way, as well as for emergency vehicles. Primarily the concern is that some point in the future that there be, the gate opens up. We just want to make sure that that is a restriction that is of record, confirming that there is no vehicular access, not only vehicular access, but no motorized access at any point along Henchy Way, including the passageway area.
You don't mean to preclude snowplows? Is that?
No, I don't mean to preclude. I mean, the association, emergency vehicles, and the two homeowners that own those two parcels. Meaning that there is no vehicular access at any point in the future by anybody along Timber Way.
So really no expansion of the right-of-way? of use.
Exactly.
Okay. Other
Yeah.
than,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And I can ask the applicant, that discussion we've had with the applicant, they're not speaking for them, but I'll ask. They can confirm our discussions, I guess would be. Secondly, that we confirm as part of the final plan, if it's approved, that the passage or the passageway, the walkway, is on the outside or ocean side of each of the houses. That would keep the public passing by be as far away from the existing residents as possible. Again, I would reiterate that part of that is at the passageway, we really don't, we want to confirm that there's really no possibility for any sort of motorized vehicles, golf carts, scooters, anything that would go up and down Henchy Way, coming from Binnacle Hill 1 or Binnacle Hill 2. Couple other notes that we would ask. We strongly oppose any sort of lighting along Henchy Way that would just basically be the same as having constant headlights into the house, those two houses there. And I know that there's an easement that prevents any sort of, we'd also be interested in sort of the details surrounding exactly how the fence works and prevention as much as possible of use of the emergency access / driveway portion of the road by the by people walking, and that people stay as much as possible on the pathway and not use the driveway areas as much as possible. And that's.
Well, if you want people to stay on the pathway and not use the driveway, don't you think a little bit of lighting would help that?
I don't know how those two are connected. I mean, the pathway is 5 feet wide. If they're walking in the dark, I'd imagine that they would have their own sort of flashlight or headlamp.
Well, you'd assume they had a flashlight or headlamp, but not necessarily.
Essentially, putting lights there would create, those lights are constantly going to be on. I mean, there's no sense. So that's constant lighting for these people. For the occasional possible person that may be walking, if they're going to be walking in the dark, I would think that it's their own responsibility to make sure that they can see their way along. I mean, these people are going to have to, my clients, along with the Millers, are gonna have to constantly have lights outside if the light is put out there.
Well, suppose they make very low lighting that basically goes sideways, not upwards, so forth, enough so that people could see a path. But that would not be enough to bug somebody.
I just don't know that there's gonna be enough people walking on through there that kind of lighting is necessary. This isn't a hotel where there's constant people going back and forth. It's the occasional person. I think that at night in this area that, if they're coming from the beach and at night, in the dark, in the summer, then they should have probably planned for that. It's just, I just don't know.
Teenagers don't plan for anything.
Yeah, but they have their phone.
Well,
Yeah, that's true, they all have phones.
yeah, they've got phones, so they can, yeah, good point. Thanks, Thomas.
I have a question, and that it really deals more with the practical expectation of enforcement of, someone riding a scooter up there when, it's
Yeah.
clearly, you're asking, for a note on the plan. I guess this was the question of what is the expectation for enforcement of that?
I think that it's a situation where if it's on the plan, that provides the owners of these two lots to at least address that issue with the association and ask the association to enforce those rules and enforce those covenants by which the lot owners purchase those properties. I understand that it's not we're not gonna be able to call the cops or anything like that. I mean, I understand the limitations of that, but having something on the plan, having something set forth in the covenants, having something that points to the association saying, look, I know Jimmy rode up the scooter, we've gotten word that that's gotta stop. And utilizing the enforcement powers that the association has.
Okay.
You made a
Thanks.
more intriguing picture with the thought of the homeowners themselves each deciding that getting to the beach with a golf cart was a great idea. Can we cut This
that
would
part?
preclude that.
Yeah, but then they have to park it, and there's no parking.
Yeah. But that is just something that we'd
Shuttle
ask.
service. Understood.
All right.
Any questions?
Any other,
Lisa Miller, 4 Henchy Way. First, I'd like to thank the attorney and the developer and his attorney and engineer, because you guys have come a long way since the original plan, and we do appreciate it. And the fact that I keep speaking, I'm sure I'm your least favorite person on earth. I have my civil engineer here this evening, and he actually suggested I talk, and he's here for support. So we're down to a couple of minor issues. So thank you for acknowledging that your intent is, in fact, to cut down the lovely Norway spruce, because they have to cut it down or they can't build on lot 21, and that's a lot of money. And we understand that it's a lot of money. It does create an issue for us in terms of concerns about wet areas behind our property and no buffering. And the lots all along Timberway here on the south side have a forested buffer between them and the homeowners behind them. We don't have that. So we'd like to ask, if you intend to cut that tree down, that you make a provision for some kind of permanent buffering between us, because between the elevation and the likely size of the house, when you sell lots for $500,000 or more, you get a large house. If we could have some landscape buffering between the rear side of lot 21 with provisions to ensure that it remains, we would be very appreciative. We also are curious as to why you are increasing the width of the road from 12 feet to 14 feet when you get from the portion of the Fetzner property where the right-of-way increases, and wondered whether it could remain 12 feet the whole way. I think visually it'd be a little more appealing. Obviously 12 feet's enough for an emergency vehicle, and it would be a little more cost-effective, plus it would be less impervious surface area. So if that's something you could do, we would greatly appreciate it. And we've talked about the turnaround. Our concern is, in reviewing with our engineer, is that the location of the gate, as presently proposed, is at the 10% slope of Henchy Way. It's a very steep area. And what we were wondering is, in your original plan, when the road was supposed to connect through, you had the hammerhead, is could the gate be moved up to the flat spot? If that's a situation, we think it would be less likely, and we'd be willing to deal with the fact that people might turn around our driveway. We can always install a chain link fence or a chain gate to keep people from doing that at our expense. But we think it would be much more desirable and, quite frankly, quite a bit safer to move the gate up further at the intersection of where Timberway comes into Henchy. We just think that it's flat up there. And right now, where the gate's proposed, it's about in the 10% grade area.
Would there be room to put the snow then, if you move that back?
Because you have the hammerhead here, and you've got field, it could be possible to create a snow storage area at the end of Timberway there for them.
What about a possible emergency vehicle turnaround or what have you? Does that limit the ability for larger trucks to move around back there if they need to?
All right, I'm not the
If
engineer.
you're moving the gate, I know.
I can have our engineer come talk to you about what's possible, but I think if you have the hammerhead up there, we're not talking about changing the hammerhead, but really this flat spot.
I guess what I'm saying, say someone comes up, they pull into the gate, they then back into the other side of the hammerhead and they turn out. If you move the gate up, does that limit the ability for someone to turn around?
Yeah, I think what you probably would need to do is create a small section of pavement at the end, so you change the location for the turnaround there. But right now, we think that the location of the gate, because of where it is and the steepness of the slope and the proximity to our driveway, that's what creates a lot of the concern. Plus, as they temporarily store the snow there, because of the grading differential with the runoff, it's likely going to run into our driveway because our garage is underneath our house, so the driveway is recessed. So it slopes down significantly from Henchy Way. And if the gates move back and the area is flat, we're less likely to have those issues. So those are my only comments. And I appreciate your thoughtful consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Yes.
Teresa Henchy De Benedictis of 10 Ocean View. I also had a little bit of an issue with the snow storage, and you've kind of pointed to the area, and is it upside, downside of the road? Just FYI, my day job is I'm an assistant director of public works in the town where I live in Massachusetts, so I have some familiarity with snow and ice operations, and that is a challenging plow, to say the least. And I think it would be aided by having the flat to get up, and if you think you're gonna be try to back drag that thing or push, that's a big plow to get that thing cleared, and you're gonna have a monumental mountain of snow, either at the top, wherever. It's of concern. So I'd like to have a better idea where you think the snow storage is and how you're gonna manage that.
All right, any more comments from the public hearing? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing, which leaves us to deliberate and vote on some waivers and such. So why don't we deliberate for a bit? Anybody have anything? I also have a potential of, I took the letter that Peter wrote approving Pinnacle Hill 1 and sort of modified it and added the waivers that we've talked about to it and things. So ultimately, I'd like to review it, but.
Well, waiver 1 on the side slopes, I think there's good rationale for it.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the waiver of the dead-end street being an extra length because you have an emergency access. If it
Right.
didn't, I would have a problem with it. But,
And the other thing that's being waived there is the hammerhead instead of the
and instead of the
cul-de-sac.
cul-de-sac, yes, and I can see the reason for that.
Yes.
And the third waiver, I think it's unfortunate. I know we've approved that before in Binnacle Hill 1.
No, we didn't.
I thought we did approve a shared drive.
We approved a shared drive, but without a waiver, apparently. Is that
Without a
correct?
waiver.
Correct.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And I signed that, okay.
Yes, you did.
Okay, well, if it takes 2 driveways at the expense of wetlands, being an environmentalist, there's no question I'm gonna give the waiver, so.
Yeah.
But I think that it's always not a good circumstance to have a shared driveway. I've known people who've had it, I've had one, and it leads to nothing but problems. But hopefully, these are single-family homes and there won't be any, so.
Yeah.
So that's my take on that. I think, given the public concerns, I think there are none of them here that can't be worked out on a final plan. I didn't hear anything there. I'm glad it's gone down to minor concerns, but I know there are issues to people and serious issues. And I think the location of the gate, lighting and so forth, needs to be looked at in more detail, but there's nothing there that would stop me from granting waivers and giving a preliminary approval of the plan. I think the plan is workable. So,
Anyone else with comments? Okay, why don't let's vote individually on the waivers, for starters. This is a preliminary approval of the waivers. They will have to be approved with the final also.
Do you, sorry, before we jump into that, do you think that we need some sort of waiver? I know we need to jump into an interpretation of the gate and the restriction of it, but do you think that a waiver is needed for that section of the subdivision?
Personally, I don't feel that a waiver is necessary, but.
That's fine.
don't
I just
think
wanted
so.
to raise
I
it.
think we could take care
You
of
know,
that
I have
with
it right here. I pulled it up.
explanation and
Okay.
interpretation of the
Alright.
land use
I'm okay
ordinance.
with that.
Yeah, but when we ultimately have the FOF, which doesn't happen now, it happens with the final, I'll make sure that it gets in.
Well, you're doing this monster.
Well, I don't know, I've gotten stuck with every single
I know.
subdivision FOF since David was here. So, you know, but if you'd like to do it instead.
No, you're the
I'll
guy.
help you with it, you draft it out.
Okay, it's a deal. Okay, anyway, side slopes, section 12.2B3B4, side slopes. So I want a motion to approve the waiver.
I'll make a
Preliminary.
motion to approve that waiver.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. Similarly, the dead-end street, the exceeding the 1,000-foot and using a hammerhead instead of a cul-de-sac. No, I'll move that we approve that.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor? Okay, the third is the private right-of-way design standards. The shared driveways on a couple of the lots will have the shared access. And we'll move it and,
So moved.
okay,
Second.
all in favor? Okay. So I guess I have drafted a letter, which I made copies of, so here's 3 or 4, which I will get over once we deal with it. I'll get a final version over to Lisa tomorrow to release, I guess. Here, have a few. So basically, it confirms that I'm assuming we will approve it, so that we will be approving this preliminary plan for Binnacle 2. And then the 4 waivers, I'm not going to put the gates there. I put it down as a possibility. I'm not going to put it there. Then I put the what I knew of at the time, which is the first thing is making sure that they will in fact address the Acorn letter. And they will in fact make the other three things that were specifically in Ralph's letter, the Henchy Way. Now the question is, do we want to add anything beyond that?
Tom, what's the tradition here? I think there's a strong feeling that the final plan does need to address the concerns with the specific location of the gate on the slope and with regard to the snow melt and snow storage.
Right. So I can add something on.
I think that we heard a reasonable request that there be consideration given to limiting the width of Henchy Way to 12 foot.
Yep. Well, I can add those considerations.
And the
basically.
buffering
The
to the Miller property.
The buffering, the 12 foot,
reasonable request.
the no vehicular, the move the gate up, and snow storage.
I think what we're asking is that they
So
be
there it is.
addressed.
Written perfectly and all set.
So this is my first foray into subdivision approvals.
Yes.
Is this normally how it goes? Do we actually write a formal findings of fact?
No,
Or
we
is
do
it
not.
just a letter?
Not for a preliminary. We write, the chairman writes a letter saying that the board has approved it.
Okay.
And
As a preliminary.
as preliminary approval, and it says, it states the word preliminary several times, and that's it. And it's done until they come in with the formal final plan, which will have answers to all these goodies and some financial junk and all sorts of fun stuff too. So
Any idea what the timetable is on that?
that's up to them. Is there a minimum?
I think it's 6 months.
They
Or
have to
maximum
submit.
6
yeah,
months.
That's a
submit
maximum.
within-
No, is there a
yeah,
minimum?
submit within
No,
6.
I don't know that there's a minimum. They're not gonna wait 6 months.
I heard half of what you said.
Right.
Well, there isn't another meeting for a month, if that helps. We are not meeting on the 4th of July. Yeah. So the next meeting is a month from now.
Yeah, we have to have an application 30 days prior to a scheduled meeting.
Okay, so it's gonna be July, or August.
August.
First August meeting. To get the 30 days. I haven't, yes, I know that. I'm going to vote, I promise. Okay. May I have a motion, please, to approve this?
I'll make a motion for preliminary approval of the plan. Is that the way it should be worded?
That sounds very good, yes.
Okay.
I will second said motion.
I'll second.
All's in favor? Okay,
You're done.
we're done. It's not even 10 o'clock yet.
Yeah.
Sure.
We certainly have our guidelines, I think, for the various issues that the board has raised or that the abutters have raised. But there's one issue which would be helpful if the board can give us guidance on, and that is the lighting along Hinchy. We've heard people don't want it, we've heard some do want it. And we can go either way, but, you know, it would be helpful to get a sense from at least several board members what the.
I know that the neighbors do not want lighting there, okay? But I think you should use your own discretion and look at it at night, where you plan to put the walkway, whether it would be a hazard for people who didn't have lighting with them, and what kind of lighting you could put in that would be the least obtrusive. I'm not saying you have to have lighting. I'm going to leave it to your discretion. Okay?
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you.
Well, I am. I don't know about the
I-
rest of the
I'm
members
of-
of the board.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion if the neighbors don't want it, then, and they're the ones that have to look at it every single day.
But they're not the ones who have to walk the.
I think there needs to be some
You could always,
personal.
you could put up a sign. You could put up a sign that says, no lighting at night, have a flashlight, and that sounds ridiculous, but that's a compromise.
I think there needs to be some personal responsibility on others
Right.
to have a flashlight, I guess.
Everybody's got a phone now, yeah.
So you just may want to discuss on the final plan a little bit of the photometrics, of that last street light, maybe in terms of the location, because I think more than likely you're going to be able to see some lighting coming off of that last, the last street light. So,
Possibly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe
Look
just
at
some,
it at night.
maybe some discussion on the final application with the photometrics that they've supplied.
have to have those.
We will
Yep.
certainly investigate that.
May need masking.
That's fair. All right, I think,
I just want to point out that our deed restriction would probably prohibit what you're looking for, so I understand where you're coming from.
Oh, the view restriction.
I don't know what the restriction is, so I cannot comment on it. As a board member, I think,
And I'd be happy to provide a copy of it if you would like.
We'll review that as well.
They'll review
yeah,
that.
I think the contractor can review that.
Okay, so, only one more thing to do.
I'll make a motion to adjourn early.
I second.
All in favor?
You
Okay.
can vote on that one.
Yeah, you guys are allowed to vote on that.
Okay.
Thank you.